Welcome to the Nutrition Mission Podcast.
This is where we're going to share information about nutrition and have insights into your own personal needs, as well as product information, as well as other information. You've got to be part of this nutrition mission.
This is the official Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market podcast. And we've been helping people live better lives since 1972. We're on a nutrition mission. Join us.
All right. Welcome again to another Nutrition Mission podcast moment. Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market. Something that's been crazy on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook Live, all over the internet, Irish moss. I thought we'd dig into it today, try to get a little understanding about Irish moss and what it does, where it came from, how long has it been around? I mean, just like, what's up with the Irish moss thing, right? I mean, I saw today a situation. So I'm on the net, and I'm looking up some stuff, and I actually see this one particular site that says, hey, Irish moss could literally like prevent Parkinson's disease, right? And I'm like, here's the deal. One thing I always recommend is this. Sourcing is important. People get it carried away. Maybe it's an animal study. Maybe it's a dog study. Who knows? Maybe it's a mouse study. All right. So that doesn't mean it's a human study. So when it becomes a human study and actually does that, that's probably time to start talking about it. Until then, it's speculation. But what we're going to do is just try to undo the speculation of what Irish moss is today, what it's all about, and just kind of like maybe just get a feel for what it is instead of what it's maybe could be or some things of that nature. All right, so what it is basically, dude, it's a seaweed, all right? So like I have a tendency to go body surfing a lot. So every time I'm out body surfing, every now and then you'll see, depends on where you go. I like specifically San Clemente is like one of my favorite places to go. I also like 44th Street in Newport. And there's always seaweed out there. So ever since I was, 18 years old, instead of being afraid of the seaweed, my dad taught us when we were kids in Laguna to like swim between the seaweed and like see cool things under the seaweed. So I always thought seaweed's kind of a friend of me, right? All right, that said, seaweed comes by, and of course, obviously being in the business that I'm in, we know that kelp tablets are good for you. Kelp tablets have all sorts of trace minerals, 72, 120, whoever you want to talk to has all the minerals known to man, and so does the sea, obviously, with the exception of what is known as the intermittent metals that basically are made like for seconds when they do nuclear energy. All right, so which you don't want. All right. Unless you're surfing to San Onofre, maybe you'll get some down there. All right. So that said, ultimately what happens is this. So seaweed floats by. I just grab some seaweed, eat a little seaweed. Hey, I'm out in the ocean. I might as well have some seaweed. I just think it's good for you, right? So, and I usually have like supplements that have kelp and alfalfa and stuff, natural minerals in it. So, yeah, it's floating by. It's like a gift. I'm going to eat some of it. All right. So a lot of you guys might be gross now. You go to the beach and you run from the seaweed, and I think it's kind of cool. So today, we're going to talk about seaweed. All right. So this is called Irish moss, and ultimately, one of the things is they call it is red algae because it's kind of a red as it dries. It's kind of a green look. When it dries, it's kind of a red substance, or it has like red connotations to it. And so, by the way, it grows obviously in the coast of Ireland, Irish sea moss, right? All right. So the other thing, it grows on the coast of Iceland. The other thing, it grows on the coast of France. And it also grows on the eastern United States coast and the Atlantic Ocean. So maybe it's just like one of those Atlantic moments, it's just like that's where it grows. Maybe they'll call it Atlantic moss someday if it carves from all the places. Anyways, what is it good for? So what I did is I kind of looked at a couple different things. I'm going to look at some traditional uses, things of that nature. We're also going to look at some TCM uses. So typically it's known as a mucilaginous. What's a mucilaginous? A mucilaginous is a substance that reduces inflammation at the mucous membrane level. Okay. So by the way, if you put it topically on you, it's known as an emollient. An emollient is something that soothes irritated mucous membranes. All right. So this mucilaginous material that basically it is used that way. A lot of times traditional use also, believe it or not, people use this as a food. Seems like in the 1800s, there was a potato shortage in Ireland. So they literally started eating sea moss as like, not only like as a culinary, like maybe garnish, but they actually started saying, hey, you know what? This is a substance that everybody needs to eat to make sure we're getting enough nutrients in our diet. And they obviously didn't know much about nutrients back in those days, vitamins and minerals, stuff like that. So, but that is one of the things that happened. So we also see that it goes back to other different times when there was like maybe famines or different things like that. They would actually use it as a food source. So kind of cool stuff. Here's a couple of thoughts. It has beta carotene, has some of the vitamin B vitamins in it, has vitamin C, has sulfur, magnesium, manganese, calcium, phosphorus, zinc, and a bunch of trace minerals. All right. So let's go into a little bit deeper thought. Let's talk about TCM, which is therapeutic Chinese medicine situation. So what they end up doing is this. They end up looking at it from a different perspective. Remember, the Chinese kind of see things from a different perspective when it comes to how they heal the body. So they actually call it a yin herb. What's a yin herb? A yin herb is something that's like retains moisture. The other thing a yin herb does is it reduces inflammation, okay? Another thing that a yin herb does too is it kind of draws water into the intestinal system, so for like hydrating and detoxification. The other thing a yin herb does as well too is it, as we were saying, cools down irritated areas like in the skin and the lungs, all right? So let's look at some of the different types of applications they talk about. Hey, this heat, as they call it, which causes inflammation, come from all sorts of different things. From the heater that's at your house, or air conditioning, or this external environment that you're around, like sun. And one of the things that you'll notice, and I'm going to pop it up in a minute, is when you look at different types of aloe vera, it has Irish moss in it. So used topically seems to be like a really cool moment. So the big thing that they also recommend for it in traditional Chinese medicine is as a digestive stimulant. It actually helps with detox and cleansing. So let's do this real fast. Let's look at a couple of things. First of all, I've got some things here. So look at basic seaweed. So I brought some basic seaweed up. So this is a blend of different types of seaweeds. So ultimately, I pull it up, and here it is in the container. Looks like we maybe are going to sit there and have a bite of it. I had some earlier. By the way, it's extremely salty. This particular version of seaweed obviously has a lot of salt in it. Very common, all right? So then one of the things that, and this is what's going to be interesting when we talk about Irish moss. Irish moss fits in a lot of other different areas. And so one of the areas that it actually fits in is a thickening agent. So I brought some agar. They actually recommend using it instead of agar. And so this is agar, and this is a seaweed basically that I put in water. So agar ultimately ends up being a thickening agent. As you could see, it looks like a jelly. And ultimately, if I turn it upside down, it's been in here overnight. It literally is so thick and so clumpy, and you touch it, it feels really kind of moist and cold. You put it on your hands, it kind of feels kind of cool, right? So what happens is that it's a thickening agent, oftentimes used in different types of food preparations. In fact, when it comes to agar in Japan is basically the carrageenan that we use here. Now, there's a big word. Carrageenan kind of gets popular in the food world about 5 or 10 years ago as being like, hey, carrageenan is bad for you. It's like the worst thing in the world. So carrageenan, of course, was in yogurt. Carrageenan literally is in lotion. Carrageenan ends up being like all these different substances, which kind of brings in the moisture, holds it. Well, where do they get carrageenan? Well, they get it from Irish moss. You get it from these different seaweeds. And what they basically do is they use like an acid process to extract out the carrageenan, and they put it in as a thickening agent. All right. So when it becomes a thickening agent, all of a sudden now everyone's got this problem. So, oh my God, carrageenan is bad for you and all these other different things. So you dig into carrageenan, as I said, it's processed from seaweeds and ultimately ends up being this substance that oftentimes is used in so many different foods and things of that nature, and ends up getting this negative connotation. Now, all of a sudden, Irish moss, which of course is the base for carrageenan, is the heal-all. So I always say one thing you want to do before you jump on the bandwagon, kind of dig in a little bit. Mind you, I do get the idea. The Irish moss, chemically processed or heat-treated or hydrochloric acid-treated, is an extraction process, and it's probably not something that you want to use 85,000 pounds of it a day, but ultimately, it's going to slip into food. It's going to be something of still just a thickening agent. All right, so it's been in all sorts of different formulas forever. So let's continue to work past this thickening agent idea. When you use it by itself, Irish moss is one of the applications used in the digestive system. It's like a detoxification and cleansing agent. Okay. The other thing it seems to do is break up mucus. Believe it or not, you do get mucus in your intestinal system. So it seems to actually break it up. So I want you to kind of relate this. It's a little bit different, relatable moment. One of the things that we sell for chronic coughs and for chronic buildup of inflammation in the lungs is Marshmallow and Slippery Elm. You'll find it slipped in a lot of different types of cough formulas. And so Marshmallow and Slippery Elm are what is known as mucilaginous agents. And what they do is actually break the mucus up in the lungs and kind of help to facilitate back like a normal balance. So does Irish moss. So we actually see a lot of different people talking about that for immunity. I don't know necessarily if it's tricking the immune system on or off. One of the biggest things we do know, though, it's working at the mucous membrane level, helping to normalize that mucus inflammation process that's there. Okay? All right, so this one's another interesting one. Kind of fun. As I said, When it comes to seaweeds, seaweeds have a lot of trace minerals in it. So I read off the list of all the different vitamins and minerals and things that it has that's in it. And one of the things I kind of glassed over was iodine. It's a great source of iodine. So what is iodine? Iodine is a trace mineral. It's an essential trace mineral. You can't live without it, and there's reasons. Actually, the deficiency is known as cretinism, which basically is like a mental development issue. And so what happens here is iodine is necessary by the thyroid gland. So the thyroid takes iodine, and it couples it with the amino acid tyrosine, and it produces what is known as thyroxine. What is thyroxine? It's the thyroid hormone. So what happens for years, we've had different types of formulas on the market for the thyroid. So here's a classic one. Solaray made this probably like back in the 70s, maybe even far back as like the late 60s. And this formula ends up being a formula of different herbs that are supportive for the thyroid gland. So let's look at the first ingredient, kelp. Obviously, iodine source. Second ingredient, you got it, Irish moss. Third ingredient, eleuthero, which of course is Siberian ginseng, gentian, fenugreek, cayenne pepper. So this is a classic old thyroid support formula. And one of the biggest things is providing those trace minerals. All right, so let's dig a little deeper. So remember I told you that iodine combines with tyrosine and it forms thyroxine. Believe it or not, if there's no zinc and there's no copper available, the body can't activate the enzyme system that makes that happen. Yeah, you guessed it. It's in Irish moss. So Irish moss ends up becoming this situation where it's very, very nutritive to the system. So you see a lot of people on the TikTok and moment like that saying, hey, it's great for weight loss, things of that nature. And later on, I'll tell you how much you need to take and all that other stuff like that. What I say is this, it's a substance that provides iodine. The other thing it does is because of the mucilaginous, it calms down the digestive tract. Also because of the fiber in the gel, it kind of quiets down the digestive system so you're not as hungry. All right, so that's probably where its biggest benefits are for that. All right, so then we also got to think about this. We got to think about toxicity. How much of this stuff can we do? How much is good? How much is not good? All right, so I dug into some different sources. By the way, I went into traditional Chinese medicine. Then I went into traditional American herbalism and all the other different things. And everyone says, hey, look, appropriate dosages are safe. Obviously, it's not something you want to overconsume. So then I dig into another guy's book, and he's like, kind of like, he's more of a pharmacy guy. And he basically says, hey, look, here's the deal. A couple things with it. We noticed that large amounts, and I don't know what large amounts were, but it kind of lowered blood pressure, okay? So he was saying, hey, if you're using this stuff and you stand up fast and get dizzy, you might want to consider checking your blood pressure, right? So the other thing, he said, if you're using blood thinners and other different types of medications and also being pregnant, you probably don't want to use this stuff, all right? So those are some caveats that you're not seeing from too many other people because everybody else is just telling you, hey, it's safe. I agree with them. The dosage done properly, probably safe, all right? How do you make this stuff? Well, a lot of people are just taking the powder, they put it in the blender, and they put it in with a smoothie and let it do its thing, all right? And I'm not saying that's a bad way to do it, but the ultimately old school way of doing this was literally taking a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon, you put it in a glass of water, and you let it stand for 15 minutes. Then what you do is you put it into another pint of boiling water and you steep it literally for about 10 to 15 minutes. What's this going to do? This is going to make it have that jelly consistency. Because I noticed when I took this and put it into water on its own, that jelly consistency never really developed. But once you process it with the hot water, it gets that jelly consistency. So it's a little bit more thick, kind of puts you in that situation where maybe you're going to get more of that like full feeling with it. All right, finally, on the skin topically. So one of the things that's cool is we actually have aloe vera. As we all know, aloe vera is amazing. Very few companies actually use Irish moss in it. We actually have an aloe in the Clark's label that has Irish moss with it. Everybody else is saying theirs is Carrageenan. So what you'll notice with this is it makes it super thick. So I put some in my hand. Hopefully you'll be able to see this, be able to see on the palm that ends up being jelly thick. All right. So the reason why is because aloe vera itself, which is so amazing, is one of those compounds when you use, obviously it's a water compound unless you've added some type of a thickener to it. So a lot of the different types of aloe vera that you get for sunburn and things of that nature, they might be using something else, but this is a good old classic aloe vera that's got the Irish moss and versus the Carrageenan and so other different compounds, stays on the skin for a long period of time, feels cool and refreshing, doing what it's supposed to do. All right, so hopefully that'll give you a little information about Irish moss, bring you up to date on what's going on out in the world. So kind of give you that fast fact moment on kind of bring you to the speed of something that's unique on the market. By the way, it's old school, new school, revisited, kind of a fun topic. Thanks again for listening and watching to another episode of Nutrition Mission at Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market.
Thank you guys for joining us today on our Mission Nutrition podcast, the official Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market podcast. We've got another exciting episode for you next week, so be sure to review, subscribe, follow us, and stay connected.
Absolutely, be part of it. We've got so much we're going to share with you. It's going to be an amazing ride.
We'll see you next time.